If lying is a crime, Esther Lungu's explosive claim against Hichilema. It's one of the most controversial political statements Zambia has heard in recent months. If lying is a crime, Esther Lungu says, then President Hichilema and several of his officials should already be in Mukobeko. Strong words. Serious implications. But what exactly prompted this statement, and what does it mean for Zambia's political climate? Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. Well, what a week it's been across the continent. But today, we're diving into a story emerging from Zambia that has sent shockwaves through the political establishment, a story of accusations, alleged deception, and a former First Lady breaking her silence. Picture this: the wife of a former president, a woman who once walked the halls of State House with dignity and grace, now stands in a courtroom facing corruption charges. But instead of silence, instead of retreat, she unleashes a claim so explosive it threatens to unravel the very narrative that brought the current administration to power. What happens when the accused becomes the accuser? When someone facing the weight of the state's legal machinery turns the tables and says, if lying is a crime, then arrest the president himself? What drives a former First Lady to publicly challenge the head of state, to accuse him of fabricating the very grounds upon which her prosecution stands? Is this the desperate gambit of someone cornered by justice? Or is it the courageous revelation of a woman who has finally had enough of what she claims is political persecution masquerading as anti-corruption crusade? And if her claims hold even a grain of truth, what does it mean for Zambia's fight against corruption? What does it mean for the integrity of the justice system? What does it mean when the line between justice and vendetta becomes so blurred that citizens can no longer tell the difference? Factual foundation, background and timeline. The revelation came to light during court proceedings in Lusaka, where Esther Lungu, wife of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, appeared to face charges related to alleged corruption and possession of property suspected to be proceeds of crime. To understand the gravity of this moment, we need to step back. When President Hakainde Hichilema took office in August 2021, he did so on a platform that promised transformation, economic recovery, and most prominently, an uncompromising war against corruption. The previous Lungu administration, he claimed, had looted state resources and enriched themselves at the expense of ordinary Zambians. The first signs of this anti-corruption drive targeting the Lungu family emerged in early 2022. Investigators began scrutinizing properties, vehicles, and assets linked to the former First family. By mid-2023, formal charges were filed. The state alleged that Esther Lungu had acquired properties and assets worth millions of dollars that she could not reasonably account for through legitimate means. Throughout 2024, the case moved through the courts. Edgar Lungu himself faced separate investigations. The former president's allies cried foul, calling it political persecution. The government insisted it was simply the rule of law in action. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a recent court appearance, surrounded by supporters and facing down prosecutors, Esther Lungu didn't just defend herself against the charges. She went on the offensive. She made a claim that struck at the heart of President Hichilema's credibility, that he had deliberately lied to the Zambian people about the extent and nature of the Lungu family's alleged wrongdoing. Standing before the court, with the weight of the nation's attention upon her, Esther Lungu's words were measured but devastating. According to reports from the courtroom, she stated, "If lying is a crime in this country, then President Hichilema should be the first to be arrested. He stood before the Zambian people and made claims about properties, about wealth, about corruption that he knew were false." She continued, her voice reportedly growing stronger with each accusation. "The president told this nation that we owned 50 properties. 50. He said we had looted the country dry. He painted us as thieves before we ever set foot in a courtroom. But where are these 50 properties? Where is the evidence of this massive corruption he spoke of so confidently?" According to witnesses present, she paused, letting the question hang in the air before pressing on. "I challenge the government, I challenge the president himself. Produce the evidence of these 50 properties. Show the people what you claimed existed. Because if you cannot, if you stood before the nation and made accusations you knew were false, then who is the real criminal here? Her legal team, emboldened by her statement, echoed her sentiments outside the courthouse. Her lead attorney was quoted as saying, "What we're seeing here is, a pattern of trial by media, of conviction by accusation." The president made very specific claims. 50 properties, massive wealth, systematic looting. So far, the state has produced evidence of what? A handful of properties? Some vehicles? Where is the evidence to support the narrative that was sold to the Zambian people? The attorney continued. My client is not saying she's above scrutiny. She's saying, that the scrutiny should be based on facts, not political rhetoric. And if the president used falsehoods to justify this prosecution, then we need to ask some very serious questions about the integrity of this entire process. Meanwhile, government spokespersons have been quick to respond. The Ministry of Justice released a statement asserting, the charges against Mrs. Lungu are based on evidence gathered through proper investigative procedures. The courts will determine the merits of the case. Any suggestion that these prosecutions are politically motivated is without foundation. But Esther Lungu's supporters have seized upon what they see as a telling omission. Nowhere in the government's response is there a specific rebuttal of her central claim about the 50 properties. Deeper analysis, implications and reactions. This confrontation raises profound questions that extend far beyond one court case or one family's legal troubles. First, there's the question of political accountability. In the heat of an election campaign, politicians make claims all the time. But when those claims become the basis for criminal prosecutions, when they're used to justify the deployment of state power against political opponents, do they carry a different level of responsibility? Should a president be held accountable if corruption allegations made during a campaign prove to be exaggerated or false? Legal analysts have weighed in from multiple angles. Some argue that campaign rhetoric and criminal evidence are two separate things, that even if Hichilema overstated the case publicly, what matters is whether the prosecutors can prove their charges in court with admissible evidence. Others contend that Esther Lungu has identified a critical vulnerability in the government's approach. If the administration used inflated accusations to create public support for prosecutions, it undermines public trust in the anti-corruption drive itself. One Lusaka-based constitutional lawyer, speaking on condition of anonymity, observed, the danger here is that genuine corruption cases get tainted by the perception of political motivation. If people believe these prosecutions are about settling scores rather than serving justice, it damages the entire rule of law framework. Opposition political parties have, predictably, rallied around Esther Lungu's statement. The Patriotic Front, Edgar Lungu's party, has called for an independent inquiry into what they termed the weaponization of the justice system. They've demanded that President Hichilema either produce evidence of the 50 properties or publicly apologize for misleading the nation. But it's not just opposition voices raising concerns. Civil society organizations focused on governance and transparency find themselves in a difficult position. Many supported Hichilema's election precisely because of his anti-corruption promises. Now some are asking uncomfortable questions about whether the execution of that promise has strayed from its noble intentions. There's also the matter of precedent. Zambia has a troubled history with political prosecutions. Previous administrations have been accused of using corruption charges to silence critics and eliminate political rivals. Hichilema himself faced prosecution under the Lungu administration. Charges that were eventually dropped after he took office, which his supporters cited as evidence of their political nature. Now the accusation has been reversed. The former prosecutor has become the prosecuted, and she's using the same playbook, claiming political persecution, questioning the evidence, challenging the motives behind the charges. And perhaps most troubling of all, the ambiguity that remains. As of now, the government hasn't provided a detailed public accounting of the specific properties they claim were obtained through corrupt means. The 50 property claim that Esther Lungu challenges appears to have been made in political speeches rather than formal legal documents. This leaves the public in a fog of uncertainty, unable to verify either the president's original claims or Esther Lungu's denials. So where does this leave Zambia? Where does it leave a nation trying to hold its leaders accountable while protecting the integrity of its justice system? Esther Lungu has thrown down a gauntlet. She's essentially said, "Prove it or admit you lied." The government now faces a choice: produce comprehensive evidence that supports the narrative they've constructed, or face growing questions about whether this anti-corruption drive is what it claims to be. For ordinary Zambians watching this drama unfold, the stakes couldn't be higher. Because if they can't trust that corruption prosecutions are based on solid evidence rather than political convenience, then the entire foundation of accountability crumbles. And if they can't trust their president to tell them the truth about the extent of corruption, then how can they trust anything else they're told? These are questions without easy answers. These are questions that will shape Zambia's political landscape for years to come. Thank you so much for watching this edition of InspirAfrica Official. This is a developing story, and you can bet we'll be following every twist and turn. What do you think about Esther Lungu's explosive claim? Do you believe this is political persecution or justice finally catching up with corruption? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you, especially our Zambian viewers who are living through this moment in your nation's history. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from across the continent that demand your attention, that challenge your perspectives, and that remind us why staying informed matters. Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay inspired. This is Nakash, signing off.